For posterity.
Everyone on good behavior. All right, let's go right to the prayers. Yeah. Sangye chodang soki choknamla Jamchu bardu dagni kyapsushi Dagni jinso gipe sonamki Drola penchir sangye druparsho Sangye chodang soki choknamla Jamchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi jinzo gipe sonamki Drola benchir sangye druparsho Sangye chodam soki choknamla Jamchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi jinso gipe sonamki Drola benchir sangye druparsho. For immeasurables, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies.
May I be blessed by my gurus and deities to have the power to help sentient beings accomplish these fortunate states. I would like to present to you two sentient beings who are enjoying happiness here as they listen to the Dharma.
Yes, they are very, very happy.
They're getting a little Dharma with cuddling.
Tashi and Massimo. We told the guy who was staying here, who Massimo is his cat, and he had to leave, but leave Massimo with us, and he's now back. But we told him he can't have Massimo back.
He was okay with that
because Massimo is just having way too good a time here, and Tashi just loves him so. So the guy said that's okay. 7-limb prayer. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And the mandala offering. Zadipaki jukshin meto Tramri Nide Yenvarki Sangizindu Videruaki Drogna Yakshila Chepasho Idam Guru Radha Matayam. Here you go. Yedama Hetu. Om Yedama Hetu Prabhava. Hetu Tesham Tathagato Yavadat. Tesham Cha Yoniroda. Evam Vahi Mahashramana Soha. And Nagarjuna's stanza 5 from Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. By extinguishing actions and afflictions, there is liberation. Actions and afflictions arise from misconceptions, and misconceptions arise from elaborations. Elaborations will cease through cultivating emptiness. All right.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. We had a teacher once, his name was Hallelujah Khalil Khalil, and whenever he would call us on the phone, or if we'd call him on the phone, he would answer it, he'd go, Hallelujah. This is this Egyptian guy singing Handel over the phone, it was pretty funny. All right, we have a interesting topic today, is the nature of existence. I bet you can all guess what it is.
Okay, for an extra bonus packet of incense, who can guess what the nature?
Who can guess what the nature of existence is? Oh, nobody wants to. Nobody wants to commit. All right, what is the nature of existence? And what I did here was, before going into Shantideva, I decided, all right, I'm going to go to the dictionary and I'm going to see what the dictionary says what existence is. And it was kind of interesting. So here are some samples. I believe, there are various dictionaries, but mostly I think Merriam-Webster. There'll be statements such as, existence is the state of being real or participating in reality. Well, the problem with that definition is it's not defining what's real and what's reality, but that's interesting. Here's another one. Existence is having real being, whether material or spiritual. But again, what is real? What is real being? Here's another one. Existence is reality as presented in experience. Again, that's pretty good, except we're still not getting what's reality. And here's the one that really stood out to me. Existence is the manner of being that is common to every mode of being. And I thought, this one is the closest match to what the Buddha would say existence is. From the Buddhist perspective, the manner of being that is common to every mode of being is dependent arising. So that's a pretty good definition, I thought. The manner of being common to every mode of being, which is dependent arising. So if we look at or observe, I should say, all existent phenomena through the lens of logical analysis and reasoning, we're going to find that all existent phenomena, no matter what it is, arise in dependence upon multiple causes and conditions. For instance, we'll find that all phenomena which are capable of functioning, that means capable of yielding benefit or harm, of actually doing something. Any phenomena like that necessarily depends upon impermanence. This means that they're not frozen in some kind of state where they can't change, or the phenomena can't interact with other phenomena in ways. So impermanence is essential for any kind of phenomenon to be able to function, to be able to do anything. Otherwise, it's just frozen like a block and can't do anything. Phenomena also exist in dependence on relativity, and that means if the word longer can only exist in relation to shorter. You cannot have some self-existent thing that you call long because you have nothing to relate it to. So the only way to understand what long is to understand what short is, and vice versa. There are other things like this. Nearness, distance, thickness, thinness, there's all kinds of things which it depends on relativity. Here's another one. Subject and object are also mutually dependent. An object cannot be experienced unless there is a subject who experiences it. And I guess you could say vice versa.
Yeah.
A subject cannot experience anything unless there's an object for that subject to experience,
Which
right?
is in fact the state of our consciousness.
And that's the case. That's the case. Our consciousness is
Always gonna
subjective.
change.
It is subjective. And this is important to remember as we're talking about the nature of existence, because a lot of times Western science so far, up until now, it's starting to do this now, but up until now, Western science has been viewing reality as the objective thing that's not out there and not putting into the equation that consciousness is an essential part of what existence is. Yeah. So I gave an example here of the aroma of freshly brewed coffee can't be experienced unless there is actual freshly brewed coffee happening and some sense consciousness, like a nose sense consciousness, there in proximity to experience that. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. So it needs both. And in order for that subject and object to exist, there has to be, for anything to exist, there has to be a consciousness that experiences it and the object that is being experienced.
So they say.
Yeah, well, I mean, you just think about it logically. That's got to be the truth.
Well, I guess so, but it gets kind of complicated when you think, well, even if I'm not in the room and I don't smell the aroma of the coffee particles that have been pulled up by the vapor that's floating around the room is still there.
All I said was you just have to be in proximity to, get a whiff of it.
Yeah, I know, but then to make the leap that it's not there, it doesn't exist because.
Well, this goes back to that whole thing.
I know.
When Geshe Drakpa would take his glasses, put them behind his back and say, "You think my glasses are still there, don't you?" And we go, "Of course." But our eye consciousness was actually not seeing the glasses.
I think there's obviously something else we're not.
There's something we're not getting.
Rocking, as they say.
But from our own experience does not. We can't say something we're not experiencing actually exists. And this gets into like really interesting topics if we're starting to talk about media, the world, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right, it goes back to if a tree in the woods falls down and there's nobody there to hear it, did it make a sound?
Did it make a sound? And the answer is no, because if there was no one to hear it, then that sound does not occur.
No, but the airwaves, that cause what we call sound.
Yeah, but it wasn't translated into sound. Right.
Yeah, right.
Like if there were no birds, no animals, it's kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I always feel bad when we get into these discussions for someone such as Brian, who has very expansive, detailed scientific training, who probably thinks we're.
All right, no, just. All right,
I'm sure is aware of the limitations of our thinking on
just
things.
From this particular thing we're talking about, subject and object.
Brian.
We can deduce that consciousness is an essential element of existence. Without consciousness, there could be no experience of existence. And if existence cannot be experienced, can it be said to really exist?
I mean, I think something that's bugging me right now is, again, the definition of existence. That's all I'm going to say. And so, there's a way in which we need to really be sure we understand in this context of this discussion, the definition of existence. Make sure we understand what we're talking about. Not your definition you pull out, but what their definition of existence is.
Well, the Buddha's definition of existence is
that
everything is
experienced.
Is a dependent arising.
Okay, well, anyways, you don't need. They don't need to see me.
But I guess I would ask, we have different kinds of karma, but can we have kind of a different kind of consciousness where you can have your own consciousness, whatever that is, based upon your senses, based upon your mind, but you can also have a collective consciousness that exists, that incorporates the consciousnesses from every sentient being that's in existence. And so if every sentient being is if the consciousness of those can be connected or collective, then the tree falling in the forest still does make a sound because there is a collective consciousness. It's like
Yeah.
if I know there's a car driving on the road in front of me and I see the car, yes, I know that the car is driving on the road, but I know the car is going down the road after my own consciousness cannot see it, because it will not stop when it just immediately leaves my consciousness. So it does have to continue, and somehow we have to be able to account for that continuing activity. So I don't know if we have collective consciousness. I don't know if that's a thing in Buddhism and whether that
But
exists or not.
Brian, your comments triggered a thought in me that I think is worth sharing about that question. I've never thought of it this way. Let's just say, okay, so we know consciousness is defined as aware and knowing, right? So it can apprehend phenomena and then it can identify them, what they are. So imagine, and they do say that as we, roughly speaking, purify our consciousness, it becomes aware of increasingly more subtle phenomena. So let's just take that. So then I think one thing that I'm thinking related to your comment, Brian, is as a consciousness could then theoretically, I mean, this maybe is what happens, become aware of such subtle consciousnesses and able to apprehend such subtle levels of things with its consciousness that it indeed does become aware of another consciousness, assuming that consciousnesses are discrete. Each mind stream has its quote own consciousness. So imagine then being in a situation where your consciousness is so able to operate at such a subtle level that it becomes aware and able to apprehend consciousnesses in general. And thus you can see, in terms of apprehending a phenomena, that at a subtle level, again, using words, you could have, a bunch of consciousnesses who are, quote, individual mind streams, so subtle in what they can apprehend that they're apprehending each other simultaneously, just as we can look out and see, hundreds of separate discrete items. When I look out the window, I can see all at once, all at the same time, trees, leaves, ground, dirt, bugs, the house, the bell ringing, all this different stuff. I mean, I'm wondering now, in terms of what we would label as collective consciousness, if what is going on in that phenomenon and why that's a thing, why there's the term collective consciousness, is because there are individuals who have experienced such a subtle level of consciousness that they are able to in some way merge with other consciousnesses and experience other consciousnesses and come away with this like, oh wow, this is collective consciousness, labeling it that in our language. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
I think you're right. I think that actually occurs. I think that occurs in our own experience. I mean, just here's just a simple thing. Kavita and I, we've known each other since we were 13. I mean, we're very close. So we can be, this has occurred where we'll be sort of walking silently together and we will have had like the same song going on in our head or the same thought or idea, and one of us will speak it and we'll go, oh, I was thinking the exact same thing. Or other examples, and maybe some of you have had this, where you have feel a sense that somebody is thinking about you and they're going to call you, and then the phone rings and it is that person. So I think consciousness is not, I mean, the definition of what consciousness is immaterial. It's not a material, it's not matter. So it's transparent, it's clear, it's aware, but it's not saying that it can't, and it's not limited by space, proximity. It's not limited in that way at all, in the way that matter is. So we can, if there's a strong connection between certain kinds of consciousnesses, I think those consciousnesses can actually communicate without being physically present. So yeah, I think you could have something like what you would call collective consciousness. If there were a whole lot of people that were feeling or thinking or experiencing the same kind of thing at the same time, the consciousness may be so powerful that everybody is sort of feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm talking about a subtle level where you would actually know you were experiencing.
Well, some people are like that. The ones who we call psychic, who are quite
Good,
who are
that's
quite good
point.
at that.
That's a good point.
you know.
Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know how that plays into your little the analysis you just did, Brian, on whether or not the car driving still existed, but it did raise the
Yeah.
in my mind a new way of thinking about the probability of quote collective consciousness, in the sense that discrete quote individual quote end quote mind
Right.
streams are so operating so subtly that it's as if they were one consciousness.
I
Kind of like the
yeah.
drops of water in the ocean.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That's right. If you think of drops of water in the ocean, it's
Anyway,
an interesting thing.
that's
Each
not-
you can
not-
pull out individual
And
drops.
and how does that lead to love and compassion?
Well,
And then you can see, this is what we call in our grosser experience, empathy.
well, it also goes back to interconnectedness. Interdependence, interconnectedness leads to love and compassion.
I mean,
Things are
all this
connected.
discussion is still under the umbrella of how do we develop reliable compassion?
Yeah, right.
And Shanti Dev is saying, you gotta understand
We
this.
have to understand the nature of existence, basically, to do it. Yeah, you can. Yeah, that's where he goes with it. And those cases also where we're aware of another conscious subtly, that there still is subject and object at play. You have your own personal awareness, and you're aware of another consciousness. I mean, this is really. I mean, this has happened to me. I gave examples last week of hearing, your brother Bud after he died speaking in my ear. It wasn't me. I knew it wasn't my conscious, but there still was. That was an object, and I was the subject. But it was just consciousness.
So, Christopher, can I just ask a clarifying question? Because I'm stumbling on this. So if we take your example about the glasses are in front and I can see the glasses, and then you put the glasses behind your back, they don't exist. But then if you pull them back out in front, they exist. So their existence is dependent upon the observer. Is that correct?
It's dependent upon the observer and the object being observed. And I think maybe what Geshe Drakpa was pointing out is if the object is not being observed, your eye sense consciousness is not seeing it. It's not being observed. So for the eye sense consciousness, it's actually not there. Our mental consciousness, although, which has all kinds of concepts, goes, sure, it's there. All you have to do is pull it from behind your back. But the eye sense consciousness, which is not conceptual, it's not conceptual.
I just want to say, it has to be more subtle than this, because basically all you're saying, Christopher, in this explanation is, if you put it behind your back, you can't see it.
That's right. Well, that's all what was happening when Geshe Drakpa did that.
But I felt like he was pointing towards something much more subtle.
If he was, we're not there yet.
No, I know. In a way, really, in my opinion, Kevin, Christopher's only proper response to you is, I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know. But what I do know is,
good question.
What I do know is that the eye sense consciousness is not a conceptual one. It's just picking up shape and color. So when the glasses go behind the back, the eye sense consciousness, they don't exist for the eye sense consciousness.
But the way Kevin asked the question, the way he worded the question, he was getting at whether they exist, not whether my eyes can see them or not. So I just want to point that out.
Right.
And you can't answer it, so don't try to say any more words.
Yes, I can. They do not exist for the eye sense consciousness.
That's all we're saying.
Right.
If I put it behind my back.
But they do exist for conceptual consciousness.
For the mind.
Yeah, for conceptual consciousness.
Ooh, scary.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway.
So, But other than that, I don't know. I mean, really, I don't know, because I can't get inside what Geshe Drakpa was thinking.
I assume at some point we'll all understand the answer to that, but
Some
so
point.
far.
All right, let's see. Oh, here we go. How
It's
things
sort
like
of
this.
partly Brian's
Yeah.
point too about the car driving down the road. I mean, this is the question.
Again, that's
Yeah.
mental consciousness, that conceptual consciousness that knows.
You
That
see it in your mind.
yeah, the mind's going, the car's continuing down the road or around the corner, all of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looks like a light bulb in the mind, it's ready to go off.
Any moment.
So here's another way things exist dependently. Cause and effect exist as mutually dependent entities as well. A cause cannot exist as such without an effect, nor can there be an effect without a cause. For instance, a being cannot exist as a grandparent until they have a grandchild. Before you had a grandchild, Kevin or Brian, you were not a grandparent. So by having a grandchild, you then become a grandparent. So it's a mutually dependent thing. And this goes to all kinds of relationships. For instance, an entity cannot exist as a creator without a creation. Without a creation, that's not a creator. That's pretty logical. So until there is a creation, still something has been created, then you cannot say there's a creator. So what this ultimately means is that when all existent phenomena are logically analyzed, they are found to be entirely lacking in any kind of true, independent, inherent existence. Same as what we've been talking about all through this chapter. So everything is therefore said to be empty of inherent existence. So another way of putting that definition that I found in the dictionary would be, emptiness is the manner of being that is common to every mode of being. Emptiness of existing independently, self-existing independently, is the manner of being that is common to every mode of being. And it's up to us to look at that and see if that's true, if that is logical, and reasonable. And so far for me, it is. I haven't found anything that I can point to and say that is a self-existing independent thing. It's kind of impossible. So now we're going into the importance of reasoning and logic, and the importance of the whole system of reasoning and logic that was developed initially Newland, where Shantideva was ordained as a monk in the 8th century. Newland had a very robust system of training in analysis and logic and reasoning, and their system of debate is what was brought to Tibet, and Tibet carried that on and has carried that on throughout the centuries, so that the Tibetans have developed a very rigorous system of debate, and the purpose of that debate is to analyze logically and get to the real valid meaning of something. So that's what we're going to talk about here for a little bit. A lot of this is taken from it is a book on debate written by it's called Debate in Tibetan Buddhism, and it's written by Daniel E. Perdue. All of us are born with a capacity to reason. We have greater or lesser capacities for reasoning, and those capacities are utilized to a greater or lesser extent. But in all cases, the development of the ability to reason is linked to training. Like any other skill that we want to accomplish, it's linked to training. We have to train in that skill until we become adept at it. It just doesn't happen. So logic is this way as well. It requires training to become skilled at logic and reasoning. This is why the Tibetan Buddhist monasteries have developed a system of training in reasoning, logic, the nature of knowledge, and debate. Sentient beings suffer continuously in the prison-like trap of cyclic existence due to the powerful force of ignorance. There is no possibility to escape this revolving entanglement and delusion of birth, aging, sickness, and death until we generate within our own continuums the realizations that destroy ignorance. The Buddha said, quote, Buddhas neither wash sins away with water, nor remove beings' sufferings with their hands, nor transfer their realizations to others. Beings are freed through the teachings of the truth, the nature of things. So the Buddhists can't grant liberation to us, but they can teach us the nature of phenomena, and by that means enable us to escape the suffering of cyclic existence through our own attainment of wisdom. As we've said a lot before, ignorance is the root cause of suffering. Out of ignorance arises this ego grasping, which then creates all of the problems that we have, that we see going on now. That's all ego grasping.
I may not be correct in this statement, but it is my current working opinion that in our world today, the main deficit is not that humans lack compassion. And I've thought about this a lot, because you can talk about all the violent conflicts happening and all of the things going on, and even in hurtful biases and prejudices and so forth, because all those human beings engaged in harmful thinking and activity, in general, they all possess compassion towards one thing or another. And I think we all know of famous examples of terrible vilified beings throughout history, and yet they exhibited compassion in some way or another. So two things about this: what we're discussing here, and the goal as a Buddhist, is to have that compassion be non-biased and reliable. As Geshe Drakpa used to say, the reason we have to study the wisdom wing is because our compassion, he said, we have to study this nature of reality because our compassion is not reliable. So the point I'd like to offer up for thought is, the world does not lack compassion. So all these trainings for compassion, developing compassion, if you look around, you can see there's lots of compassion. The key is to make it reliable and unbiased. And that is why the wisdom wing exists. That's why, whether we like it or not, if we look into our own lives, we can see our own compassion is not reliable. And it's because we have not had the realizations on the wisdom wing side of things. So in our world, in my opinion, we don't need more compassion training. We need more wisdom training and more logic training, more reasoning training, so that we can lead each other to unbiased compassion. Okay, that's the end of my sermon for today.
I bet not. But Kavita's absolutely right. And Shanti Davis said the whole purpose of the previous chapters, all the ones that were on generosity, patience, ethics, all of that kind of stuff, and the courageous effort that's required, were leading to this chapter on logic, analysis, reasoning. What is actually the nature of everything? So she's absolutely correct. And Geshe Drakpa used to say this: compassion is not reliable without wisdom. It just isn't. We know we all have it. We have it for those we care about. We have it for those who we think are on our side.
I would go so far to say is why we see all the suffering in the world is because we don't have wisdom.
Oh,
you see the compassion and the love and the generosity, all those nice things, empathy coming and going like a little blowing in the wind, with all the parties that we can talk about. If you hate Republicans or Democrats or libertarians or Nazis or whatever you hate or love, all that there's compassion in there.
It's
and
biased,
lacking in all cases is unbiased wisdom to make it a pervasive.
So that's the point of this. That's the point of this. The point of Buddhist practice, Mahayana Buddhist practice, is to have compassion that is completely stable, equal, and understand why. Why? So let's see, where are we? Learning and wisdom. Wisdom is the antidote to ignorance. Learning and wisdom enable us to see the nature of phenomena in the same way that light illuminates a room so that you can see what's in there. A dark room so that you can see what's in there. Lati Rinpoche, who served as the 14th Dalai Lama, our current Dalai Lama, served as his spiritual advisor, and he taught at His Holiness's personal monastery in Dharamsala, Namgyal, said, "There is no phenomenon which cannot be understood. There is no doctrine which, if studied well, cannot be learned. And there is no person who, if he or she studies well, cannot become wise." That was Lati Rinpoche. He wrote the I believe it's the book on, I think it's him. Yeah, this book. This is Lati Rinpoche. Death, Intermediate State, and Rebirth. That's Lati Rinpoche. And he said there's not one of us that can't become wise if we study well. We can do it. That's good to remember.
I think one of the big problems that we got to overcome is because we know things, we conflate that with being wise and unbiased. And we have to step back and realize everything we think we know has been taught to us by someone else. And it's not the same as wisdom.
But
Information
yeah.
and wisdom are not the same.
The more actual wisdom, especially being on this particular path, the more actual wisdom we gain, the bigger our heart's going to be, the more compassion we're going to have, the more love we're going to have, the more we walk into a room and we will have this feeling of connection and compassion for everybody, not just the ones who we think are our friends or who we know. But I think the more wisdom we have, the more we're actually going to understand the nature of what it means to be a sentient being and what it is we're all going through. And the more wisdom we have, the more help we'll be able to offer. The more we can be a part of the solution. So it's really, really, really important. All right, so now I'm going to talk about what the purpose of debate. This the book it's over on the other bookshelf. Big old book on debate.
The one I
by Daniel
course
Perdue.
on Ryan.
Yeah, and it would be good if we could sometime at some point get into this. It's tough, but it would be worth it. So the purpose of debate. There are three main purposes of Tibetan monastic debate. Here's the book. It's a crazy read, I'll tell you.
Incidentally, Geshe Zopa wrote the debate textbook that they use at Seramph Monastery, which is, in our same lineage, as a little, what do they call that? Kind of information.
A little bit of side information.
Yeah, I forget the word.
All right, now the purpose of debate.
Old age disease.
The purpose of the debate, there are three main purposes. The first is to overcome misconceptions, to sort of root them out, to understand what our misconceptions are that we think aren't misconceptions, things we don't even think are misconceptions. Debate and this logic and analysis will enable us to see, oh, I am misconceiving this. I'm not looking at this. I'm not thinking about this in the correct way. So that's the first point, to overcome misconceptions. The second point is to establish the correct view. What is the correct conception? What is the correct perception? To really establish that. And as we said at the beginning, the nature, if you want to say the nature of existence, is that everything is a dependent arising. which means everything is completely empty of any kind of inherently independent, self-existent nature, which is, for some reason, is the way we kind of think things are. I think because it appears to us that way. I think it's because it appears to us that way, and it makes me wonder, why does it appear to us that way? It must be because that's how we thought things should be, and we developed all of this. This was all developed. This body and these senses and everything we have are done in such a way that things appear as if they're all separate, independent, and exist, not in a connected way when they actually do. So that's the first, is to get rid of that misconception, and then find out what is the correct view, what is the correct conception. All right, the third purpose of debate is then to clear away all the objections to that correct view. So that's where debate comes in. You say this is a misconception. You say this. Somebody else says this is the correct view, and then people have objections to what that correct view. But, and then you have to be able to clear away all of those objections in a logical, reasonable, rational way, so that the opponent can concede and say you're correct. That's true. You're right. And the whole point is to become wiser, more logical, so that we can become more compassionate, more loving, more benefit. We can't do it without the logic. So the debate aspect is extremely important. So with the Gelugpa monks, they make a lot of effort to learn what the Buddha's words are and to fully understand the meaning of the Buddha's teachings. And they do this through the process of debate. So whenever they have a class that's been given to them, then what they all do is they go out into the debate courtyard, and they have debate partners or a little group, and they will go over the topics that were discussed. And there'll be one poor guy or monk or somebody sitting there, and he's supposed to be answering the questions, and they keep refuting him. But the point is so that everyone can get very, very clear about what was being taught that day. And it's an amazing thing to see it. I mean, it's a very, very active process, and there's a lot of energy involved in it. Geshe Drakpa was known for his debating powers, as was Geshe Zopa.
One thing it would be good to also, when you hear the word debate in this context, think of it more like a logic exercise, because it's not like
they're
not arguing. They're saying, for example, if you said the Rock of Gibraltar is permanent, this school of philosophy says the Rock of Gibraltar is permanent, and that would be your position, and you'd be sitting there, and then someone would ask you, well, if it's permanent, can it lose particles of sand every year falling into the ocean? And
right.
that is the nature, and you'd have to go, well, yes, and then they'd say, see, it's not permanent.
Not permanent. Right.
I mean, it's sort of this, I just oversimplify drastically, but that's
like
how you
that.
come to understand why they apply to then behavior.
Okay, so for those monks who are seeking inner peace and spiritual growth, the sole purpose for study is to put the Buddha's teachings into practice in order to gain enlightenment. And for those of us who are on the Bodhisattva path, that would be our sole purpose, is to put the teachings of the Buddha into practice so that we can attain enlightenment and then be of benefit, truly be of benefit to other beings who are sort of trapped in this rotating prison called samsara. The knowledge to be gained from debate is central to this process. Debate is not merely academic, but a way to understand the nature of existence through the careful analysis of how ordinary phenomena exist. The essential purpose of Buddhist debate is to let go of what is not helpful and arrive at an indisputable understanding of reality. if we're seeking inner peace and spiritual growth, if we wish to put the Buddhist teachings into practice in order to attain enlightenment, we must learn what to focus our attention on. And they say, like bees gathering honey, taking only what is essential and leaving the rest. So there's also a process of letting go. As we develop our wisdom, we begin to let go of things that don't matter, that are not essential to what our goal is to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so we begin to just go, this is not essential to that. I'm going to let go of it. It doesn't matter to me anymore. And that's part of the process. Only taking what's essential and letting go of what isn't. So now here, as we get into these stanzas of Shantideva, bear in mind that's what he's doing. He's showing us, and I said this before in the other sections, he's showing us the process of debate. He's showing us setting forth a particular, I don't know what they call it, but that you set forth a particular kind of proposition. Then somebody will challenge that, and then you come back with why that is so.
Yeah, he's been doing that.
And he's been doing that, and he's doing that in this section. So it's important that we understand that's what he's doing. He was really well trained in debate. As I said before, from Newland, that's where the whole debate tradition went up to Tibet, and then they carried it forward. So Shantideva is showing us the process of debate here.
Yeah, earlier on in the chapter, some school says things are permanent.
Right.
And he'd say, well, okay, if that's,
It's just like what you said.
Yeah.
It's just like what you said with Rock and Gibraltar. All right, so here's stanza 111. Those who say that both subject and object are true, meaning independently self-existent, are hard-pressed to maintain their case. If consciousness reveals the truth of things, on what grounds in its turn does consciousness exist? So what's being said here is those philosophers who assert that there's a substantial reality that underlies all phenomena. So let's call them substantialists. Philosophers who say there is substantial reality here, there's substantial reality in this, there's substantial reality here. They hold the belief that objective phenomena which are experienced and the subjective consciousness that experiences them both have truly independent self-existence. Not like what we were talking before, subject and subject and object are mutually dependent. A substantialist would say, no, they both exist independently. So what Shantideva is saying, this is very difficult to maintain since it cannot be established by valid, well-grounded, logical reasoning and perception. Substantialist philosophers will, of course, say that consciousness is established beyond doubt as a truly independent, self-existing, valid awareness. Therefore, they'll say, the very fact that it observes things as existing is enough to establish that those things do truly exist. In fact, they do. But what Shantideva is then saying here, on what grounds then is the consciousness itself, the subjective consciousness itself, on what grounds can it be established as being independently self-existent? Consciousness, which is by nature subjective, we know this is our experience of it, it is not objective. Our consciousness, for instance, we all know our consciousness can't somehow go outside of us, turn around and look at our own consciousness. I'm not saying you can see a reflection of your body in the mirror, but that's not your consciousness observing its actual consciousness. Consciousness, again, is immaterial, it's aware, clear, and knowing, and that it is by nature subjective. So there's no way that our subjective consciousness can somehow objectively observe itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So Shantideva is saying, nor is there any other conscious entity that could possibly do this. It couldn't be another subjective consciousness that can prove the objective reality, independent reality of another consciousness. That would result, if you did that, it would result in an infinite regressive series of subjective consciousnesses trying to prove their own objective existence, and that it can't be done. Here's stanza 112. If knowledge objects, and when he says knowledge objects, he's saying objects that consciousness will observe. If knowledge objects can show that consciousness exists, then what is it that shows that those objects exist as being independently self-existent? If both the objects and the consciousnesses that observe them, if both of them subsist through mutual dependence, both will thereby lose their true independent self-existence. So one could argue that the independent self-existence of the consciousness is proven by the fact that it experiences the perception of independently self-existing objects. But then what proof is there of an independently self-existent object? Is that somehow proven by the consciousness's experience of it? If the object that's being perceived and the consciousness that is perceiving it, both are needed to prove the existence of each other, then obviously the two of them, neither of them have any kind of independent self-existence. It is impossible to use either the object or consciousness as proof of the independent self-existence of either of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, we go back to this other issue, but
Yeah.
what we were talking about before, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times the way it's worded, you're just scratching your head. So I just wanted to make sure that's sort of clear.
I don't know how you can address this other question we have about, does it exist in is there a mode of existence for objects other than our consciousness apprehending it? Is apprehending something required for something to exist? I mean, that's what
That's an interesting thing, because if there's no consciousness, to go back to that same,
I
if a
know.
tree falls in the woods and
It's-
there's
it-
no one
It's
there.
a different question.
Yeah.
It's a different question. Can phenomena exist without something apprehending it?
Is it a different question?
Yes, in my mind, it's a different question.
Well, all right. Well,
I can't elaborate. I just,
because it doesn't actually seem like a different question.
it is.
If there's nothing
my
there to
mind.
apprehend something, does
No,
it exist?
No, if there's no one to apprehend,
Well,
does the object still exist?
that's what I'm saying.
And I'm saying, not the object, not even, does a phenomena exist even if I can't, even if there's no consciousness apprehending it? I mean, it's a abstraction.
Well, this is what you have to do, is you have to understand that consciousness is an essential element to existence. If there is no awareness of existence, none whatsoever, no awareness of existence, how can you say that there is anything? How can you say there are the planets and space and galaxies and?
Well, if some people, so, we've been talking about collective consciousness and things like that. So we're making an assumption we have a consciousness. Therefore, we can infer other people have a consciousness as well. So we might live in a desert and have absolutely no conscious awareness of a tree, because we've never seen a tree because we live in a desert. But there are other consciousnesses who know what a tree is because they live where they are and they see them and they observe them. So to Kavita's question, I think the answer is, as long as there is a consciousness out there that has had the ability to perceive the object, it does exist somewhere out there, just not where you might be in the desert.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
here's a way of saying that, Tracy. I'm really glad you articulated that in that way. So in a way, you could say, we've talked several times in recent weeks about this example where Geshe Drakpa looked at Victoria and said, you think your house is back where you left it when you came to class this morning. You know, but it's not.
Yeah, I remember that.
Really saying is it doesn't exist for you.
Right.
Perhaps what he was saying, is
Right.
it may exist for your next door neighbor who's still there staring at it, but
Correct.
I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, and
So
I don't really know
Here,
what the answer is.
what I'm saying, and maybe I haven't made this clear,
Pretty easy to
Someone else can
understand,
always be observing it.
what I'm trying to say is,
because you can't.
if there is no consciousness whatsoever, I'm not saying your consciousness,
Okay,
my-
yeah.
if there is no consciousness, period, end of story, no consciousness, can we actually say that the galaxies, the planets, the whole system of everything exists? That all those objects exist? If there is no consciousness whatsoever anywhere to observe it, that's what I'm trying to say.
Awesome.
And what's the answer to that?
We'll find out in the next chapter.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, keep going.
My answer would be existence must consciousness has to be an element of what
Okay,
existence.
You keep saying
know?
that, we get it.
Otherwise, it just doesn't even make sense.
So Christopher,
Yeah.
to that end then, so if we take that as the starting point, then the quote unquote things that we have discovered over the existence of what we've labeled human consciousness have really just been discovered by the most recent iteration of either individual or collective consciousness, but they have been there all along. They've just been observed by or experienced by another set of consciousness. So I'm thinking, for example, like atoms, right? Although the ancient Greeks talked about what they thought matter constituted, they didn't have the idea of atoms and electrons and neutrons. But atoms, electrons, and neutrons all existed, and they existed because there was some consciousness other than human consciousness could perceive them, and it was only until we developed the technology that allowed human consciousness to see it that it entered our consciousness. Is that?
I would agree with that. I would agree with it, because what we are somehow assuming that everything starts with human consciousness, and we're assuming that the history of existence it didn't come into it only has to do with our human consciousness. It doesn't mean that consciousness hasn't been part of existence since beginningless time, is what Buddhism will say. So it doesn't mean there hasn't already been consciousnesses that completely know what atoms are and protons and things we don't even know now yet. We will keep discovering those things. But according to the Buddhist view, without a consciousness, those things would not exist. And for us, they don't exist until we become conscious of them, for us particular humans. But it doesn't mean that they haven't existed for other consciousnesses who have a broader view than we perhaps have had. That is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is you could say just it all exists out there somehow, and until consciousness is aware of it,
Like a cure for cancer.
Yeah,
It's there. We just
aren't aware of it.
I mean, it's
But there's probably somebody who does have a cure for cancer
Mhm.
of some consciousness. There's a cause.
Yeah.
There is a cause.
Cause and effect.
Yeah. So,
Back and
But
forth.
Christopher, let me,
Mm.
my understanding is that consciousness itself is a dependent arising.
mm,
So the reality of everything is dependent arising. So I guess in one way, does that suppose that something exists always, that everything always exists, even if it's not independent. It always exists, but as you're saying, you don't have the consciousness to be able to observe its existence for whatever reason. And until the dependent arising and causes and conditions occur that allows that consciousness to be developed to observe it, then you know it exists. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what they say, what occurs when one has achieved enlightenment, is they say this thing, you become omniscient, and you know what everything. Omniscience means you know everything. So you get to a point where all we can do is sort of conceptualize this, but get to a point of what you might call primordial consciousness, which is just basically has no beginning. According to Buddhism, you are not going to find the reason why consciousness is dependent arising is it's arising on previous moments of itself, and in its relationship between consciousness and objects of consciousness. They're completely interdependent, and they postulate that there is no beginning to that, which is very difficult for us in the West to get our conceptual minds around. But they say that there is no beginning to consciousness itself, and therefore there would be no beginning to the objects of consciousness as well.
Right. So I guess if I want to push this analogy a little further, then everything already exists, and it can change depending upon causes and conditions. So yeah, atoms have existed since the beginning of this time, but the causes and conditions didn't allow us to observe it until we had the technology, or we had the proper labeling or language or whatever the convention is to do it. But that says to me, then everything exists, like your eyeglasses behind the back still have to exist. But dependent, you can't observe it because that particular consciousness is not. I'm not articulating this quite as clearly as I'm trying to. The point I'm trying to make is everything exists. Going back to this argument about collective consciousness, and does the car that I can't see still drive down the road? It must drive down the road, but my consciousness can't see it, but it still does exist.
Because other consciousnesses are witnessing it.
Yeah.
Well, even if other consciousnesses are not witnessing it, that's my point. Everything must already exist.
Here's what I would say to that. I would say that all the factors required for existence have always been there. Always. All the factors required have always been there. And yes, it is impermanence is part of that. So the appearance and the shape or the experience of existence can continually change, but all the factors that required for existence have always been there and always will be there. And so within that, then the impermanence can function, and things can change. We can discover things, but all the factors for existence, basically you would say consciousness and objects of consciousness would be some form of very, 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 I guess you could say, subtle form of what we might call matter. Very, very subtle, like energy. All of those factors have always existed. So in that sense, yes, everything, I would say the factors for existence have always been there. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think, and again, I need to think a little bit more about this, but I think it must make a difference to realize that everything already exists, and it's only our ability to interpret it, see it, understand it, versus something exists or doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so the way we think about that, two different situations has to be important in how we think about how we, perceive. No, I'm not perceive, not the right word. How we live our lives, basically. I'm trying to get back to the fundamental connection about how all this stuff is going to help me become a better
Right.
person, individual, compassionate, whatever you want to call it, by understanding dependent arising. So I can understand dependent arising as that everything depends upon everything else, but now I've added to that maybe everything already is existed since the beginning of this time, and we can change it, and it's impermanent because of causes and conditions on our own perception, but still fundamentally everything has existed. And if everything has existed, can you actually destroy anything that has always existed?
I don't think you can destroy consciousness or I guess the very subtle energy, because in Buddhism, what they talk about it is that these two, consciousness and the subtle energy, are always connected, and they are indestructible. So if you were going to go back to what we would say as materialists in the West, the origins of the universe, they'll say there is no origin. There just has always been this awareness and this energy, that the awareness can do things, that they can work together, they can function together. So that has always been there. And because there is a dependently arising nature between the two, it is an impermanent kind of existing thing. And because it's impermanent, it can be altered, it can be changed, all things can be changed. And then you get to, do we want an experience of existence that includes suffering and pain and horror, or do we want an experience of existence that includes love, compassion, and wisdom? And the point of this Buddhist path is to help us to use the factors that make up existence, and use those factors in a way that will produce this effect that is actually what would be better for everything, for all of existence. So that the good news about impermanence, the good news about the subjective, objective, dependent arising nature of consciousness and energy, is that we actually, if we understand this, we can change it and make it a more compassionate, wise, loving, non-suffering experience.
I like that.
Does that make sense?
I get that. That makes sense. But I'm trying to be careful about not becoming too nihilistic, because if I go back to this idea that everything already exists and it's only our ability to perceive it as existing or not, even if it's changing and impermanent and what have you, then the question I go back to is, well, if it's already existed, can I actually cease its existence? Or do I only cease its existence by my refusal or inability of my consciousness not to see it or perceive it? To me, that's two different things.
Yeah, and they always say, I mean, I remember Geshe Drakpa saying to me, I said something like that to him once at our table, and he says, you're heading into a nihilistic view, he said, which is very dangerous. It's very dangerous. And so I took that to heart, because we're not looking to cause something to cease. What we're looking to is to be able to alter it, change it. It's not like you have to we don't want to destroy all of these things that we think are existing. What we want to do is transform them, change them. They can be transformed, and that's the whole point. Yeah.
Simplistically, this is very simplistic, and going to your point of how does this help us be better people, simplistically thinking about it, my opinion is our wisdom and insight into how things exist we will start to see all of the problems and negative situations and things that cause us to behave, quote, badly. We'll see all that in the same way that we see a cloud in the sky as it's morphing every single moment, and it will seem like that. And thus, then we won't latch onto it.
Yes.
This is why they always emphasize this problem with grasping. We nail it and then we react
Right.
to it as a positive or negative phenomenon.
And we're grasping on as if it was existing really, truly, independently. Right.
Right. And it's but it's not the same. Again, it's not, we never go, oh, that cloud doesn't exist. We know, we understand, because we have that level of understanding about clouds, that we know that they're an appearing phenomenon, all the stuff, the particles and the currents of the air and everything causing it to change. And so, but we never go, oh, cloud,
Mhm.
I want that cloud to stay there forever unchanged, or I hate that cloud,
Mm.
we may have an opinion on
Yeah.
about weather, but so how does that translate? How does that translate to when we look at a person as if they are a cloud? One of the things that I am meant to say daily is all phenomena are like magician's illusions, dreams, and the moon reflected on water, empty of inherent. The reason that we're meant to keep that active in our mind is so that when the mean person says something negative to you, we see it as a cloud. So when the politician makes some pronouncement, we see it as a cloud. That doesn't mean we love what it represents, but it means that we don't add to the negative energy with our own negative, anger reaction and so forth. I mean, it's very,
We always have a choice.
anyway, I just wanted to mention.
Yeah,
that.
I mean, but that's another really great point, because we always have a choice in our reactions. We don't have to. I mean, Kavita's point, and we can see this with clouds. We can see that they're constantly transforming. We can see how they're interconnected with the atmosphere. We can see that. So if we take that an example and understand that everything is that way, even though it may appear to be very, very solid for a time, then if we look at it that way, then we can realize, well, I personally can transform the situation simply by how I respond to it, how I react to it. If somebody says fuck you to me, I can either get really bent out of shape, take it really personally, and want to lash back at that person, or I can have a completely different view of it. First of all, I could just say, well, I question, why are they saying that to me? Is there something I've done? So you can transform situations just as clouds. It can transform.
I'm going to give another, because this kind of harkens a little bit or touches into some of the tone of what we were discussing with Don earlier. If you live in a culture that says we should murder and annihilate all people who love the color purple, these people are irrational. I mean, fact is, that's the crazy reality world system, samsara, that we live in, is that we are crazy enough to think someone should be murdered because color purple is their favorite color. That isn't a current thing going on, but it almost is that ridiculous. If you really, and we as Buddhists need to step back and go, I don't even want to raise a political issue because I don't want to push anybody's buttons, because we all currently are subject to our biases, and anything I say right now will push somebody's button in one way or the other. So the point being is, let's say someone says something that is so, for your consciousness and your mind and your level of understanding, is so abhorrent, and you immediately demonize that person and go, these people are disgusting. These are disgusting yahoos, and they believe this political party and they're complete idiots. What you really, as a Buddhist, might more accurately say is, wow, these clouds, these consciousness clouds that have been influenced by all of their experience and the wind currents and the biases and the information that they've been exposed to, whether or not they meant to or not, they've been exposed and they've developed in this way, these clouds. And you know what your correct response is going to be, your accurate response is going to be, your authentic wisdom inspired response is going to be, is you're going to cry, you're going to be weeping for how subject they are to their own ignorance, their own lack of hard and that analytical power to understand that they're being manipulated, basically. Anyway.
Yeah, and
you'll be crying instead of hating them.
Like I said, the more we understand wisdom and get into the
and that's why
realizations of it, the more our compassion is actually going to really, really deeply develop. And the more we will actually want to do whatever we can to help transform the situation into one that is beneficial for all.
I guess what's been in my mind lately is, I certainly have come to believe that the Buddhist philosophy and the Buddhist view of reality is the appropriate view and is one that leads to, less suffering. Okay. My challenge is how I can communicate, articulate, educate other individuals in the fundamental principles of Buddhist philosophy to get them to see that the current path they're on is not probably the best path that they can be on for their own and others' benefits. And so I am trying to think through how to help other individuals that I interface with, a lot of students, understand that, having a job, making money, getting an A, worrying about the next test, all these very imminent things that they consider absolutely essential are things that are really leading them to a more polarized, destructive, enhanced suffering existence. And so I've been trying to think about how do I articulate. And again, I teach kids about secular ethics. I teach them about ethics. I teach them lots of stuff, but it's still not. It still doesn't seem to be something. And I'm now talking more in a global sense, at least in our world. It doesn't seem to be something where the message is either articulated well enough, clearly enough, or powerfully enough that people understand it in a way that says, yeah, that's the path that makes sense, and that's the path I ought to pursue. Mm-hmm. So I'm struggling, kind of trying to figure out my own mind how to take these lessons, these learnings, these understandings, translate them into something that I can speak about to others without offending their own sensibilities and their own beliefs, but get them to understand the logic behind why this is a path that might help them lessen their suffering. Right.
If you go back to the Buddha and the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha was just presenting to others what he had found. So the Buddha, actually, all the Buddha can do is give us that information and and tell us, so the thing is, he give us that information, plus when you experience somebody, like if you actually experienced a Buddha, you would probably be quite impressed with that person. Or when people are in the presence of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they are incredibly moved. I remember Ron Nierenberg told me that when he was sitting there with the Dalai Lama just for a few minutes, he said it was the most powerful experience of his entire life, because he found himself in the presence of something that was so powerful and yet so good that it made a strong impact on him. So for us as Buddhist practitioners, this is what the way we're going to be able to actually have an effect on others is through as we get ourselves, very, very clear in who we are, how we act, what we say, do. It's not just the words we say, but how we actually are. And we talk from our own experience, and we talk in ways that connect with other people, that they can understand it, that the students can understand it. So I'm not sure this would be the case with you, but for instance, if you would just talk directly to them about, you'd say something like, my own experience has been that happiness does not come from, just having the degree, just having the beautiful big house and all of these things. Happiness, that's not where the happiness is going to come from. It's not going to come from this object out there. It's going to come from within and how you view everything.
Storytelling is always
Storytelling is really, really
You tell a
powerful.
story about somebody who got rich and suffered,
Yeah.
and then they lost everything and were happy.
But when you tell the story from your own experience, it's the most powerful, most powerful.
Yeah.
Because you can truly be authentic in what you're saying.
But and also I think your intention and aspiration, Brian, is so wonderful and to be rejoiced upon. And as you become closer and closer to a Buddha, you will become more and more able to do what you aspire to do.
So I would just say, we just keep on the path and
keep it on.
Keep trying, keep working on it, because it will begin to express itself through us. We will begin to change, and I think through that change we will be able to, really make an impression. Like I said, Ron Nierenberg told me it was the most powerful experience of his life, just sitting for a couple of minutes with His Holiness. I mean, that's pretty strong.
It's very strong.
Yeah. So this is, as bodhisattvas, this is what we would aspire to, so that we could actually have a meaningful impact, a beneficial impact on others. So we just keep working on it, and it should, it will express itself. It's difficult. I understand. I mean, samsara has never been anything but a crazy mess.
Bluntly said, the day you can do that perfectly, well, the day is going to be when you're a Buddha.
Right.
And so in the meantime, you keep your aspiration and doing the best you can and hoping and refining. And when you're doing it perfectly, you will be enlightened. So great.
Yeah.
We look forward to that.
They say after that, then the laundry.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So we'll probably wrap it up here. We have
something.
We have a same day turnaround in one of the cabins, so we'll have to get to it. But let's see if we can summarize what we talked about. Everything arises in dependence on something. So even when we're talking about consciousness and the objects of consciousness, or subject and object, we might say, they are mutually dependent. There is not a thing, according to Buddhism, not a thing in all of existence that exists, has a self-existent, independent nature. And this is actually really good, because it means things can transform. That the nature of things is that they do transform, that they do change. And it is up to us to say what direction do we want that change to occur in. I mean, we definitely have seen change occurring for the worse. We definitely have seen that. And we've seen change occurring for the worse causes nothing but suffering. Nothing but suffering, nothing but unhappiness, nothing but destruction. That's not what we want. I mean, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. So with this knowledge, with this understanding that everything is able to be transformed, then it just becomes, well, how are we personally going to work to transform things, starting with ourselves, so that they are more in alignment with what is beneficial, what is true, what is loving, what is compassion, what is filled with wisdom. So we work on ourselves that way. And then we can really much more effective in bringing about transformation in the world around us. And that's, I mean, I don't know what else we can do, you know. I mean, the Buddha wasn't able to change samsara just by waving some kind of wand and making it change. The way the Buddha worked was to get himself to this state of enlightenment, and then give that knowledge to other people, and then it's up to us. It's up to us to act on that. You know. Anything else? Okay.
No class next week.
No class next week, and we will say our closing prayers now. This actually gets into I mean, we didn't get through this little part, of course. Shantideva gets one of the major portions that he talks about. This is the existence of a creator God, which is a very very interesting section.
Yeah, so you might want to read that when Christopher mails out the link later this week.
Oh yeah, this will be in the link, but we'll actually cover it in whatever the next class is. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Where are you, Arthur? What state are you in?
I am in North Texas, actually near Abilene.
Hey, all right.
Close to home.
You're among us.
I'm heading to South Carolina.
Oh, okay. Have a safe trip.
Yeah. It's great that you join us all the time in the truck. I love it.
Good luck in your quest, Brian.
You'll have to unmute yourself, dear.
Thank you, Arthur. It's I just am faced almost daily with the massive amount of young minds who think they are already fully educated and know all the answers to everything, and have a very uni-focused way of thinking about things. And it's very consistent with where our society has been pushing all of us about material things and material wealth and career and family and all those things. And so they just are very they just lack an interest in thinking about more difficult concepts and more concepts that don't align with what they've been working for their whole lives. So it's just a challenge to try to figure out how to communicate them in a way that they hear the message and they think about the message.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, I will interrupt and give a few things that don't have anything to do with Buddhism, but one is there's a Harvard study that's been going on for 75 years, and there was a TED Talk about it. I listened to it recently, and apparently 80% of millennials and presumably younger people think that the goal in life is to have a lot of money. And I think it's a deaf audience for Buddhism right now, but as they get older, those things change. And I also had heard somebody once who was talking to Japanese young people and had asked one of them, well, are you a Buddhist? They said, no, that's for old people. So just remember that you have a difficult audience to preach to.
So it's true. It's true.
Sure.
I love that, Anne. Thank
Yeah.
you for bringing those two things into our conversation.
It's so true.
But one other thing, Harvard EDX has a class on Chinese philosophy. It's one of their most popular undergraduate classes, and he works through from Confucius on up through Lao Tzu and followers. But it's really directed at getting the students who are arriving at Harvard to recognize just how overly conditioned they have been since they first got into GT classes in first grade, that there's only one path they can follow in their lives, and that's to be a Harvard professor. And there are many other paths. So, and that also is very good, I thought, for talking to young people about if they're open to it. And they can take that. It's a free class online, but if they're at Harvard, they can take it. Okay, that's all I have to add, but nothing to add to wisdom.
No, that's really excellent. And I mean, we've even experienced with our, my own nephew and his wife, and seeing kind of they lived with us for a couple of years, and you know, they began to change their views about what was important simply because they were around us and when in the way we talk about things. And so what happens, all of us model after, you know, who we live with, whether they're our parents, our friends, who we hang out with, and we model ourselves after that. And unless we know any different, we don't see a different model that could be there. So as a teacher, Brian, I think, you know, if you're always thinking, how can I model for these young people a different way, even through the, you know, the requirements of what you have to teach, how can you get in different ways of approaching what you're teaching, you know, ethics and through stories and just through who you are, model to them a different way of being, you know, talking from your own experience. I think this is what young people need, actually. They need models. And if the society at large is not providing the models, what else can they do but just follow what they're being told? You know, so
Well, and what's available to them digitally? You know, if all the parents are working and everybody's busy with their jobs and dropping, you know, then they don't have that model.
Right.
So planting seeds, that's all you can do.
Yeah. And with that, we should probably say our prayers. Okay.
Amen, hallelujah.
May we have the power to accomplish this, right? I mean, really. Let's see. Let's do them in English again. So the dedication prayers. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that we may liberate all sentient beings from suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the view of emptiness, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And then the final dedication at the bottom of the last page. In all my lives, may I not be separated from true lamas, and so enjoy the splendor of Dharma, fully perfecting the virtues of levels and paths. May I speedily attain the state of Vajradhara. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Really good discussion, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Have
Okay.
a good couple of weeks.
So we'll see you in a
Bye,
few
you
weeks.
too.
Okay.